What's wrong with Marty Rathbun's presentation of the Suppressive Person doctrine in his book, What's Wrong with Scientology?
That's a good question. The biggest thing wrong with his effort to cover or address, or appear to at least address, the Suppressive Person doctrine, or the SP doctrine, which he does, that is, he makes this attempt in his chapter 9 that he calls Suppression. The biggest problem is really his utter failure to actually address the doctrine at all, but to use the apparent addressing of the doctrine to provide cover and legitimacy for the doctrine, which is indefensible and has no legitimacy whatsoever. What he says is that the SP doctrine is the same as the mental health community's psychopathic person or sociopathic person or antisocial person doctrine. And they are completely different. The SP doctrine, it's true, utilizes the science, the descriptions of the profession, of the mental health professionals, but the doctrines are wildly different, and there is no validation for the Suppressive Person doctrine within the psychiatric or psychological communities. And any validation for it, I think, would probably be actionable criminal. The SP doctrine actually states that anyone who speaks the truth about Scientology and about L. Ron Hubbard is a suppressive person, which is the same as an antisocial personality, a psychopathic personality. That, of course, is completely untrue. But the Scientologists use, as Marty does in his book, they use mental health professionals' descriptions of the psychopathic personality and the existing science of the psychopathic personality doctrine in order to justify the crimes which are actually committed against citizens in the Scientologists' application of the SP doctrine. SPs are simply those people who tell the truth about L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology. This is his chapter 9, Suppression. The most potent sub-study of Scientology ethics is that of the detection and handling of suppression in an individual's life. What they're actually talking about there is the detection and handling of suppressive persons.
Right.
The detection of people who they consider oppose or are a threat to Scientology acceptance and Scientology expansion. And the people who are a threat to acceptance and expansion are the people who tell the truth about Scientology and its founder. And the handling, he says here, the handling of suppression. But what he really means is the handling of suppressives. The handling of suppressives, Hubbard called fair game. The handling of suppressives has not deviated in one bit. It's true that they cannot, the Scientologists cannot perhaps get away with as much as they've gotten away with in the past, but the intention is still there to handle suppressives. And the handling that L. Ron Hubbard mandated goes by the name fair game. Rathbun continues. It also happens to be the most reviled body of work Hubbard ever penned. and that is how to detect and handle suppressive persons. Not how to detect and handle psychopathic personalities, psychopaths or sociopaths, because Scientologists do not have any tech for that. Their tech is for handling and disposing of, in whatever way they can get away with, of the people who might threaten Scientology's acceptance and expansion, the SP class. Ironically, Hubbard's perennial and harshest critics, leaders in the fields of psychiatry and psychology over the last few decades, have begun to parallel much of what Hubbard discovered on the subject in the 1950s and 1960s. Rathbun repeats this claim throughout his chapter 9, and it is completely false. Hubbard took from known psychological, psychiatric science at that time, he took his attributes, his characteristics of the psychopathic personality, and then ascribed them all, as all Scientologists do, to the class of people who speak the truth about Scientology and L. Ron Hubbard. But there is no linkage whatsoever. The people who tell the truth about Hubbard and Scientology do not have the characteristics of the psychopathic personality. And the truth is, this idea that the psychiatrists and psychologists are finally catching up to Hubbard is so untrue. It is actually evidence of the malignancy of Rathbun's thought. It's very similar to Hubbard's and the double curve that Hubbard gave to things. It's the unnecessary, ridiculous attack on the mental health professionals who, prior to Hubbard, had been investigating and trying to help dealing with the psychopathic personality. And then Hubbard came along, and then Rathbun has the audacity to claim that WOG mental health, real mental health professionals, are catching up with Hubbard. Cleckley, in his 1941 book, The Mask of Sanity, lays out the characteristics that he had observed to that time of the psychopathic personality. A lot of that has come forward in time and is generally accepted by the psychological, psychiatric communities. There is general acceptance of observations that have come down that line. Cleckley, Hare, Stout, the various names that Rathbun cites to, but they do not support in any way whatsoever the suppressive person doctrine. If you were to communicate to Dr. Hare or Dr. Stout and ask whether or not they believed that people who were critical of Scientology and L. Ron Hubbard were necessarily guilty of high crimes and were sociopathic or psychopathic personalities, they would laugh at you. It is insane that Rathbun is making such a nuts claim.